He wrote an article and he's here to read it to you for how Rye High School can start making some changes.
So I'd first like to enumerate how being black in Rye is definitely not easy, and people don't realize that, especially white people, because my experiences do not mirror theirs, and that's something that we all need to acknowledge. And unfortunately, that hasn't been the case for a lot of the administration of Rye High School, which hasn't shown the best response to my petition, which has garnered over almost 8,000 signatures. And I've been really disappointed by Dr. Burns' response especially, and I call on him to acknowledge that Black Lives Matter. Because the fact that Rye cannot say that really speaks to my experience in Rye, because so many of my peers were implicitly racist and they didn't realize that. And the fact that their own school cannot say that Black Lives Matter is truly, truly sickening. So I would love to read my petition that I wrote, and in conjunction with some of my peers, and I really think it mirrors experiences for a lot of black folk in Westchester specifically. So, Rye High School was founded upon the basis of pursuing excellence, as its mission states. The recent injustice surrounding George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, among innumerable others, has sparked a social movement whereupon the voices of black students and people of color... Oh wait, this is cut off. I'm gonna have to read it off my phone. Okay, so the recent injustice surrounding George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, among innumerable others, has sparked a social movement whereupon the voices of black students and people of color are finally being heard. We, as Rye High School alumni, ask that Rye High School beg the question, are we doing enough to preserve the moral compass we strive to achieve through our very mission? Based on data reported by the New York State government, Rye's student body is 82% white and 1% black. Given such racial discrepancy, you would assume that Rye High School would attempt to provide more diversity, whether through hiring diverse faculty or diversifying the student body itself. However, in all our years at Rye High School, very rarely have we been taught by a person of color. Such a development places emphasis upon the fact that we, as a community, are not doing enough to educate our students upon the many hardships students of color may experience. As a result, we are promoting the subsistence of racism and xenophobia as experienced by many of our non-white students. Students may not even be aware of their own racism, as it is either implicit or explicit. Since the black community was so greatly outnumbered by white faculty and students, experiences were never truly heard nor understood. To give an example, some of us have been told we act too white for a black person. Such micro-invalidations and micro-insults adhere to unjust stereotypes and invalidate our own identity. Thus, they perpetuate the very racial injustices plaguing America as we speak. When did we ever question the whiteness of our fellow students? Our experiences should emphasize how much of a privilege it is to be white in a privileged place like Rye, New York. We need to listen to the voices of Rye's 1%. Although we are thankful to have attended a wonderful high school, we ask that Rye implement structural changes, attract more diverse faculty and students in order to make sure its student body is not left with tunnel vision. lost myself. Thank you. Okay. So, no longer, oh wait. We are at a critical point in American history, and now more than ever, change is necessary. No longer can we stand idly by as our mixed and black students are left marginalized. We need our students to broaden their perspectives. RHI needs to abide by its very mission because leaving students shielded from reality only hurts them in the strive for excellence.
Right.
We would also like to touch upon how weak RHI High School's response has been in regards to the Black Lives Matter movement surrounding black injustice. In its email dated June 2nd, 2020, not once did Superintendent Dr. Eric Byrne condemn the murder of George Floyd or express support for the Black Lives Matter movement. That's right. The email was so brief, and the furthest it went to say was to say, many of the images are difficult for children and adults to process and could result in anxiety or fear. What's crazy about that is that people of color live in fear every day. It's truly disheartening. Furthermore, the email was sent to parents, not students. RHI High School is supposed to educate its students, not shy away from enumerating the injustices facing the country it stands under. In this case, RHI's response was far from excellent. It was condemnatory. This is another problem that stems from a lack of diversity because it becomes uncomfortable for a white superintendent in a white school to address a black issue.
Right.
If we have no black students, why does it matter? We must not stay silent. We must not teach our students to be silent. We ask RHI High School to ponder what message it sends students through inaction. Anti-apartheid activist Desmond Tutu said, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." As an academic institution pledging excellence, RHI High School must act as the example, not the oppressor.
Amen.
Maybe we are being harsh with our words, but we are legitimately upset, and rightfully so. Everyone should understand why by now. As an academic institution, RHI should work to amplify the voices of its marginalized students. Throughout our years at RHI High School, never was that the case. Our classes offered little to no black literature. When we read To Kill a Mockingbird in the 8th grade, our teachers seemed to beat around slavery's bush. When we were taught about slavery and segregation in U.S. history classes, that also remained the case. For instance, in some of our 11th grade AP US history class, we were forced to undertake a North versus South debate, where we would play out the roles of Confederate figures against former slaves like Dred Scott. Basically, white and black students were asked to play the role of someone justifying slavery. That's right. How uncomfortable do you think it is for a person of black descent to get assigned Robert E. Lee? Slavery and segregation were briefly touched upon and intertwined within big units. It becomes uncomfortable to talk about slavery and segregation when classrooms are filled with, if ever, a single person of black descent in the back. Not properly educating students only perpetuates the racial tension millions have gathered to protest against. Also, never were we taught about contemporary black issues. Never were the likes of Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, Rodney King, Malice Wayne Green, Abner Louima, Amadou Diallo, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, or Philando Castile remotely ever mentioned. In order to progress, we must call things for what they are. There is no side to pick. Nobody, including faculty, can act defensive and say, well, I did this or I did that. No, because you are most likely not black. All of us of black descent feel this way, so what we say is not unwarranted because it can only be the truth. On that note, we would love to address several proposals we have to address our concerns. We have written this petition united with certain alumni of the St. James boarding school in Maryland who have outlined these specific requests, which we also ask Rye High School to consider. The first one is that we require text and discourse during all 4 years of the English curriculum with an intersectional focus addressing racism, sexism, orientation, xenophobia, privilege, allyship, and activism. We also need to revamp the U.S. history curriculum to address the struggles of marginalized people in the U.S., including but not limited to the Tulsa Race Massacre, the Tuskegee Syphilis Study, the Stonewall Riots, and an increased focus on the oppression of Native American people. We also need to train faculty through programs such as those offered by the Center for Racial Justice in Education to be leaders and role models in anti-racism and intersectionality for students. We need to guide discussions around race and racism on a regular basis. We also need to address racism in the school's past and introduce intersectional diversity training as part of the curriculum. Most students do not realize how pervasive the issue is throughout Westchester County. We also need to add explicit language to the school handbook condemning discrimination, bullying, or hate speech by students on the basis of any protected characteristic and outlining punishment for these offenses. We also need to implement and reinforce emotional mental health resources on campus as safe, effective, and confidential spaces for students to disclose instances of identity-based injustices on campus. Such identity-based injustice include, but are not limited to, sexism, discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, racism, xenophobia, and socioeconomic disparity. We ask that this letter be shown to Rye High School freshmen at the beginning of every school year because not enough people in Rye hear from people of color. How beneficial do you think showing this letter to a student of black descent would be to remind them they are not alone? How beneficial do you think showing this letter would be to the white student body at Rye in the pursuit of excellence?
Yes.
We also need to make a considerable effort to attract a more diverse student body and faculty. At this point, I would like to call on Mayor Cohn specifically to act on this because through our affordable housing, we have silenced the voices of marginalized communities. We have silenced the voices of Rise 1%, and I find that truly despicable. Please respond to my email, Mayor Cohn. To provide an anecdote, this is my experience. I, Zachary Gaouad, am half black and was subjected to tinges of racism throughout my high school years. I would try to hide my curls and sometimes wished I could erase the colors from my face. If I did call my friends out on blatant instances of racism, I would be, sorry, I lost myself again. If I did call my friends out on blatant instances of racism, I would just be brushed off as overreacting or overly sensitive. No white person seemed to realize that they could never relate, and I placed partial blame on Rye High School for that.
Yep.
Because Rye is a far cry from the real world. It is a shield from it. It is a shield from it, which is so dangerous. I will not shy away from saying Rye is an almost impenetrable bubble. I didn't feel supported by faculty. I didn't feel supported by my fellow students. Going to Rye High School most definitely hurt my self-esteem, and it took courage to say that. To my fellow white Rye High School students, past and present, not everyone is white like you. Not everyone sees the world through your privileged white perspective, and listen to me. An important step towards progress is acknowledging your own privilege and listening to people who have dealt with instances of racism. Since Rye High School could never tell you that, I decided to take it upon myself. On that anecdotal note, we ask that you realize how pressing the issue at hand is. We must not wait, we must not brush things off, we must act before anything as a unified Rye community. Please listen to us. Okay. So I love to read Dr. Burns' response to my meeting. Okay, this was 6 lines. Dear Zachary, thank you so much for having the courage to compose and send the letter about race and inclusivity earlier today. I look forward to creating the structure and opportunity for our community to begin having significant conversations and to explore ways that we can grow, improve, and become more inclusive for all. I know there is much work ahead and we are committed to the task. Again, many thanks. Okay, so this was the response that I sent to the entirety of Rye High School to make it public. Okay, so Dr. Eric Byrne needs to take accountability for not doing more. The least Dr. Eric Byrne could do would be to acknowledge the struggles we, as the silenced 1%, all faced under his oversight. The least Dr. Eric Byrne could do would be to provide clarifications and specific updates as to how he will implement our important demands. The least Dr. Eric Byrne could do is to offer furthering this critical conversation with all the drafters of this letter. Not once did he apologize. Not